simultaneously during this meeting through this platform, and the public has access to contemporary listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting by using the chat by dialing the following phone number 603-236-4730 or by clicking on the following website address. You can also text questions to 603-254-6708. B, we are providing the public, I have a blurred copy of this. We're providing the public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting. We previously gave notice to the public of the necessary information for accessing this meeting, including how to access the meeting using Zoom or telephonically. Instructions have also been provided on the website of the town at www.watervillevalley.org. And C, we are providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during this meeting if there are problems with access. So if anybody has a problem, please call 603-236-4730 or email at townofwv@watervillevalley.org. And D, we will adjourn the meeting if the public is unable to access this meeting. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Let's start the meeting by taking roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. This is Margaret Turner, Chair of the Board of Select Persons, and I have no other persons in the room with me.
Rich Rita here. Hello, everybody. I am alone.
Mike Aronson alone.
Okay. Mark, I'm going to let you take it away.
And works much better when I'm unmuted.
Yes.
So our purpose was to start the discussion of the wastewater treatment plant project, which we will be taking on as part of the capital improvements program for 2021. We have been looking at it. We had an initial conversation on December 2nd with the EPA. I guess they're the Northeast region, right, Dylan? There's a permitting team that has been looking at the town of Waterville Valley's discharge permit into the Mad River. This is a permit that we've had since the 1970s when we initially started using the plant. It's been reviewed and renewed several times since we started using the plant. For the past 5 to 10 years, we have been basically on an extended permit because they were supposed to look at it. I believe it was 10 years ago, Dylan. And they just have kept putting it off and putting it off until, like I said, December 2nd, we had our initial conversation with them. This has everything that we have been basing our engineering projections on, all of the numbers that you're going to look at and everything are all based on verbal communications from the EPA. We do not have anything in writing yet, but these are the permit limits that we believe will be in writing when we receive that permit. I don't know, Dylan, do we have a date when we expect those? It'll be sometime this spring, probably, when we get our written permit.
Yeah, they just told us when we met with them to expect it early 2021.
Yeah.
So that could be any time now, for that matter.
So when we received the verbal notification from DES, we have been working with Hoyle Tanner on the existing plant, on repairs that we've made, and on potential upgrades that we could do at our existing plant. So we expanded their scope of work to identify possible options to meet the permits that we were given by the EPA on December 2nd. The results of that work that they have done, and this was Hoyle Tanner as well as Emery and Garrett Groundwater to do some initial hydrogeologic investigation of some potential sites for a groundwater discharge permit. The results of that is this technical memo that I put in your packet last week. And I can share the screen if you'd like, and we can take a look at this. So this is the memorandum. It's very detailed. The first part of it talks about our existing plant and what we have, and then it goes into the new permit limits and what the impact of those permit limits might be. Margaret, other board members, what kind of detail do you want to go into, if any, on this? Or do you want to go?
Can I make a suggestion, Mark?
Yeah,
I would like to have, first of all, let Dylan introduce himself and let people know that he's only been here a
Okay.
short while. So he's new to our system and new to the town. So he's kind of inherited this. But I think if we let Dylan walk through the big points of how our plant works now, how our plant is failing, and what they're asking us to do, that will give us an idea. And then we can get to the cost of the 3 different projects.
okay, there you go. Take it away, Dylan.
Okay. So my name is Dylan Tucker. I am the chief operator here at the wastewater treatment plant in Largo Valley. I've been here for roughly a year and a half now. Getting down to the layout of the facility. Mark, if you want to move your mouse, I'll start from the top left corner and work my way across and then down. So as it shows on the map, that would be the raw wastewater coming into the headworks, where it says wet wells on there. It goes into, there's 2 wet wells, really it forms into one. We have 2 pumps that pump the raw wastewater up to the aerated lagoons. Inside the aerated lagoons is where we have a biomass of biological sludge, which is given oxygen by the blowers that we have. It aerates the lagoons to help break down the pollution and reduce it to a smaller amount. So when it comes into the facility, you're not having such high loadings that could influence the facility or overload it in a way that it could not reduce it to be within our discharge limits. So from those aerated lagoons comes right back down into the facility where it splits off and goes to the 2 clarifiers. Inside those clarifiers, there's rakes and turbines. The turbines blend the incoming water from the lagoons with a coagulant known as polyaluminum chloride, and basically it bonds to any particulate matter, any organic matter, and settles that out to the bottom of the clarifier. The rakes are what pull the sludge into the hoppers, and it wastes the sludge up to our sludge holding pond, which I'm trying to see if is it on here?
It's right here.
Okay, so it does show it on there. So it wastes our sludge holding pond. It wastes the sludge to the sludge holding pond. The water that overflows the launders in those clarifiers, which is the supernatant, goes to the sand filters or dual media filters, where the water is forced up through the filters by hydraulic pressure, and also removes any further suspended or organic matter that is in the water. From there, it goes into our filtered water tank. Trying to see where that is on here. Does it go back to the front of that, Mark? Yeah, it goes back to the front. So see where it says wet well? Yeah. So that would be our filtered water tank. From the filtered water tank, it gets pumped out and through the ammonia reactors. Now, currently, we only use those ammonia reactors for their purpose 2 months out of the year. where we have to do breakpoint chlorination. The rest of the year, the water is still going through them, but we're not actually using them for their intended purpose. We're not mixing chlorine with the water to achieve breakpoint chlorination. So as the water comes through the ammonia removal tanks, it goes to our carbon towers, which further polish the water, and then it just, from there, we add a little bit of sodium hydroxide for pH adjustment and some sodium bisulfite for chlorine, to knock down the chlorine, neutralize it, and then it goes right to the Mad River. But to Mike's point, what I like to address with, it's kind of a loaded question, Mike, when you say to address the things that are failing with the plant. It's basically every segment besides the dual media filters are starting to fail. I'm trying, is there anything on here that details it?
Right here.
Okay, so
Wait a minute.
yeah, that's,
It's on here.
I've seen it.
this is fine, Mark. Right here is fine.
Right here.
So the most important part, really, that
Excuse me, Dylan, before you start, to clarify that, it's not what's failing, it's what's going to be required under the new guidelines and new permits is the bigger issue than what's failing.
I thought,
But
right,
yeah,
but
they're both the same, but
right.
that's what I was trying to get at.
Sure. I was going to segue into, because they're failing, there's no possible way we'll be able to meet the new limits on our renewed permit. So,
Dylan, just very quickly, it seemed to me in reading the literature that ammonia seems to be a big and costly part of this.
exactly.
Can you explain why we have to turn the ammonia into nitrogen, why that's important, and why we only do it 2 months a year, say, and not the full 12 months?
Sure. So the ammonia limit that we currently have is we only have to meet it 2 months out of the year currently, which is July and August. Just give me 1 second. I have to silence an alarm. Sorry.
I think it's worth mentioning that, am I on? Yeah. I think it's worth mentioning for people that have seen this for the first time that the water that we release to the Mad River is actually purer than the Mad River itself.
Yes, that is correct.
But the new levels will not be good enough for us.
All right. I'm sorry
Right.
about that. So picking up where I left off, the only months we have to meet our ammonia limit currently are July and August. We do have a report, as it shows in this description box here. The reason why it is that way is because they consider July and August to be more so the growing seasons. So ammonia will act as not only as a toxic chemical, but it will also act as a fertilizer, which will produce a lot more growth in the Mad River that wouldn't have been there if the plant didn't exist. You know, the way the EPA looks at it is there's nothing upstream of us discharging that could influence the river in a negative way. So that restriction was put in based on everything upstream of us. So they want to keep the river basically in as pristine condition as can be. Now, I can't tell you why the other 10 months out of the year there's no limit. When I first was hired here, I was scratching my head at that because it makes no sense to me. The only thing that I can tell you is the permit was issued in 1974, and Waterville Valley has never had any sort of violations, so it was easily looked over. With that being said, the infrastructure and the equipment that we have here is not suitable to meet a ammonia limit year round. For what we do currently in July and August, it's still not the greatest technology. There's a reason why only a handful of plants in all of North America use it. And by handful, I mean 3 or 4.
And that low level of 1 mg,
yes,
as I understand.
It's the lowest. That is the lowest ammonia limit that I have seen on a permit in all of New England. And it really, what it comes down to is the receiving water, because it's considered so pristine by the EPA that they want to make sure that it's protected.
At least for those 2 months.
Right, exactly. Until now, of course, where you get the 12.7 milligram per liter in the months of May through June and September through October.
Right.
And again, further treating, having to meet even a 12.7. The common permit for ammonia removal in New England is a 10 milligram per liter in the effluent. So that's why that number, it seems like an arbitrary number, but it's really not. It's just based off of loading capacity based on our flow. So with these parameters being set, it makes it a lot more difficult to meet them with what we have, because lagoon plants were never designed to meet a ammonia limit. They were designed to reduce biological oxygen demand to what's considered a safe level when it meets the receiving waters. That's partly why when this place was built, it was built with breakpoint chlorination, because it's compact. You don't need a widespread area to treat for ammonia. And it's all chemical based. It's not biological in any way, which is super costly. And it sounds crazy to say after all these years, because nothing's happened here, but it's incredibly dangerous. We form hydrochloric acid by using this method. And it's also something that it's airborne. So all the equipment that's in the back half of the facility where all the ammonia removal happens is totally corroded. I mean, it's got 40 plus years of corrosion, which is what's causing these issues that we're having now at the plant. That's aside from the new permit being issued. So
the bottom line is we have had this permit that has been for 2 months out of the year to meet 1 milligram per liter, which is an extraordinarily high permit level. Okay. We have met it in those 2 months. During the summer, as Dylan said, we could open the plant up. It didn't have as much of an impact on the operation of our plant as it would have been trying to meet those limits in other months when the weather was bad, and we would not have been able to open the plant up the way we were in the summer. Now, with the proposed limits, we're looking at ammonia limits being imposed 12 months out of the year, which means we either have to significantly upgrade our existing plant or we have to build a new plant. Given the age of our plant and the fact that a lot of the equipment in there is original to the plant when it was built in 1972 to 74, it didn't make any sense from an operational standpoint to rehab 50-year-old equipment. So we looked at replacement options for the plant. One of the factors that's impacting the money that we're talking about is if the EPA comes back and tells us that we have to meet these limits, the new limits, immediately, we will have to spend a lot of money in the existing plant in order to get it to meet the limits while we build the new plant. So you will see on the breakdown the costs that we have set aside money for making improvements at the existing facility, even though the goal is to have some sort of new facility in place within the next 5 years. And we would only do that if the EPA orders us to meet these all 12 months of these limits shown on this page.
Mark and Dylan, a quick question to clarify something.
Yeah.
Am I correct in our earlier discussions with this, that the ammonia treatment we use is only cost viable when the water temperature hits a certain level? If we were to have to do it during year round where the water temperature is significantly lower, it wouldn't even work, or the amount of chemicals needed and the amount of time operating the plant to try to even get close to these levels wouldn't be feasible. Am I correct with that?
That's the assumption that we have, and that's the literature that I have read about breakpoint chlorination supports that. The problem, Mike, that I have with stating that is 110% fact is there isn't anyone that I can really talk with or get any guidance from, because it's such a rare treatment method. The state of New Hampshire, they don't know anything about it. The Operations Bureau, they have no idea how it works. When they were here this past summer with the issue we had with the lagoon, they were asking me what we do for breakpoint chlorination. They have no idea of how it works. The EPA doesn't know how it works because of how antiquated it is. When we were discussing with them, they had no idea what we really did. So what I'm afraid of is just that. The density of the water changing, or if temperature-based issues do occur, we could be utilizing, in the summertime, we use tons of chlorine, absolutely incredible amounts of chlorine. And it could be just as bad, or if not worse, in the wintertime because of those issues, temperature-related issues, I should say.
Mark, is that the $1.5 million in the study? In the event, is that for the possibility that EPA will come back and say we have to improve our plant?
Yes, Rich, that's a part of it, because that is just what we know right now we would have to do. It does not include, if we got the permit requirements for 12 months out of the year, it does not include any HVAC system improvements or anything on the existing plant.
Okay, I'm looking at table 3, right?
Yeah, we don't know if we would have to, what page is that?
12.
Yeah, so this equipment is just Dylan, correct me if I say anything wrong here. This is just if we have to meet the permit requirements, or if something that is really old right now, even if we keep our current limits, there is a lot of aged infrastructure in that plant right now. These numbers allow us to make repairs and keep the plant operating until we take it out of commission.
That's correct.
So this is money we're going to have to spend no matter where we decide to go with the plant.
Well, we immediately know we will try to control these costs as much as we can, but the problem is, if anything breaks, just like what has happened the past summer with the lagoons, we have not had the amount of money that it will take to fix what is really old in the plant. So it isn't like you can just take it out of fund balance. These are hundreds of thousands of dollar items.
Right. So that's what I'm talking about. We're talking about a new source of income for this.
Right, exactly.
No matter what we decide.
But we are going to try to keep this as much of a contingency expense as we can. So we're not going to purposely go in and start wholesale replacement of what's in there. We're going to run it as much as we can the way it is because we're meeting permit requirements. And as long as nothing breaks and as long as the EPA does not change the standards on us, we won't spend this money.
Yeah, as long as Murphy doesn't show up.
But
Exactly.
wait a minute. Let me clarify that, Mark. But Dylan, didn't you say the EPA was going to come in with a new set of guidelines from us
A
in early
draft.
21?
Yeah,
So if we are looking at a new set of guidelines, are we going to have any kind of appeal process or a grace period to meet the guidelines, Dylan?
yes.
Approximately how long do you think that would be?
So, well, that's kind of a two-part question, but we will have an appeals process. However, after the appeals process is done, we don't know if we will have a grace period to meet the new permit. They could.
But in your experience, what kind of time frame is it? Is there we just went through a thing with a dam in town, right? You came in at the end of that. But is there a certain reasonableness we can expect if we continue to operate at the levels we've been before?
So there is, but the thing that throws a wrench into everything is because we already meet the 1 milligram per liter in the summertime, and the new parameters that are being set are a lesser number, or they're easier to achieve in the eyes of the EPA. They could require us to meet these parameters immediately, as soon as the permit is issued. So that is what's difficult. But in other instances where plants get a consent order, they are given years to meet the new limit. But that's when you have a totally new parameter being set where there hasn't been one before. For example, say we never had an ammonia permit, and all of a sudden the EPA issued us one on our new NIPTES permit. It would give us time to be able to adapt the plant to meet that permit. Whereas here, we already do meet probably the strictest ammonia permit that the strictest ammonia permit I've seen in New England. They already know we can meet that, so they might not give us any grace period, which is
So we get a 30-day period to make comments once they give us the permit limits. We can come up with a set of our comments within that 30 days. Then I don't know how long it will take EPA to respond to that. It could be weeks, it could be months. We don't know if it would happen in 2020. That's purely up to the EPA. At that point, once they respond, then they make a decision at that point whether or not we have to meet those permits immediately or whether we can wait until we bring the new plant online. Because we're going to tell them as part of this process that we are in the conceptual phase of the new plant. But again, it's going to be purely up to the EPA. So anywhere, Mike, from 30 days to 2022, we really don't know how long it's going to be. And it's not only the length of time, it's also the immediacy of whether or not we're going to be told to put those new permit limits into effect, or if they're going to give us a grace period.
And that could mean immediate treatment for ammonia,
That could mean immediate meeting all those
right?
those numbers on that first
Yep, I get it.
table.
Which even if we spend the money to do some upgrades to the existing plant, we're not sure that our ammonia process will work in the colder months.
That's correct. And we don't know from an operational standpoint, we don't know how much it's going to cost for chemicals in order to meet those limits either, right? So like Dylan said, it could take 5 times the amount of chemicals that we've used historically in July and August in order to meet those additional 10 months. We don't know what that is.
Do we have any idea what our ammonia levels are in the untreated months?
Yeah,
Yeah. There's
they're
a,
up here. Hold
Where they-
on, I'll get to
going
them.
up, Mark. Yeah, there's a bar graph.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's what that was. I didn't quite understand that.
Yeah. So one thing I'd like to point out, and I mentioned this to the engineers when we met with them, or zoomed with them, did a Zoom meeting with them. The average monthly effluent NH3, which is ammonia, is skewed in the January, February, and March, December through March months. That's shown on this graph because that's our effluent number, not our lagoon number. So what we treat is not really based on what's going out. It's based on what's coming in, if that makes sense. So because we use chlorine year round, it's not breakpoint chlorination, but because we do add chlorine year round to our clarifiers, you do get some sort of bonding. Coming out of the lagoons, it exceeds 40 milligrams per liter of NH3, ammonia nitrogen, easily in those winter months.
Yeah, so these, in other words, these blue bars are bigger than they're showing right
Correct.
here, right, Dylan?
That's correct. And really doesn't make a difference at this point, but another factor is that the carbon will uptake inorganic ammonia because it will hold anything particulate on its surface area. So if it can grab it out of the water, it will hold it on its surface area, which is that's what carbon's main function is. So.
Okay. Any other questions on our current? Does this answer all the questions that you had, Mike, on the current? You're
I
muted.
guess basically what this graph shows is that in most instances, our average monthly effluent is below what is projected to be the new monthly average.
Right.
But that's effluent, though.
Yeah. What I'm just trying to get people who are, I see we've got some community members here who aren't maybe not aware of our situation and aware
Right.
of where we've been and where we're going. So that's why I've been asking about this. And the one thing I would also consider is if we look at the master plan by Tyrell, they look to, if their plan comes together, of adding probably 300 units, meaning hotel rooms and other things at least, which would be a lot more on our processing side. And I hope we're planning for that when we build this so we don't come up short.
Absolutely.
Yes. So I'm going to go to so we've developed 4 options to look at. Okay. And we've got a table that summarizes those options. Let me pull that up. So you want to just talk through these, Dylan?
Sure. Starting with A1, that would be, as Mark had mentioned and I had mentioned previously, it would be basically going through and replacing every single piece of equipment that is showing signs of failure, and that would require retrofitting. Again, it's a 50-year-old plant that really it's one of a kind in every single way. There's not really any piece of equipment that's utilized in the way that we use it in other facilities, which drives the price up. That's the downside to what we have. And it's not so much the equipment really, as much as it's the labor to get everything installed properly, because of how shoehorned everything is inside of this facility. It's so compact. And that number, the cost range where it says more than A2, the reason why they phrase it that way is because they can't compare what we have in refurbishment to other facilities because there isn't anything out there to compare it to because of our treatment process. But the extent of equipment that needs to be replaced and the magnitude of it is substantial. A2 is a sequencing batch reactor facility with tertiary filtration. That is if we stay with a surface water discharge. So if we have to continue to discharge our effluent to the Mad River, we will have to go with an activated sludge facility, which is a sequencing batch reactor. It's typically 2 tanks that will fill, go through their treatment cycle, periodic aeration. It will biologically remove almost all of the contaminants that are in the wastewater. As we're here, it's almost all chemically. What drives the price up on that is it's not so much the sequencing batch reactor. I mean, a new activated sludge plant is expensive, but it's the tertiary filtration because that's kind of an unknown. What will be required to meet the 1 milligram per liter suspended solids, which we didn't talk about until now. So that 1 milligram per liter of suspended solids, I have not been able to find anywhere in the United States that has that same parameter as we do. I've talked to different state agencies. I've researched NIPT's permits, and is to my knowledge, we have the lowest suspended solids limit in all of the country. That's where the tertiary filtration cost really drives that number up. If we're able to do a groundwater discharge, which it would be, I'm skipping around, but skipping down to B1 and B2, that's why that price is, it says 11 million to 13 million for an SBR with new rapid infiltration basins. It's a substantial amount of money less than having to build an SBR plant with tertiary treatment. Tertiary treatment is really just polishing water, basically so there's no suspended solids or anything. It makes the water look crystal clear, which is basically what we do in the current treatment building that we have here to meet that 1 milligram per liter of suspended solids. The problem with B1, option B1, is the lagoons are 50 years old, we'll say, almost 50 years old, and we know that they have signs of failure. So putting money into something that has signs of failure and not knowing if we will get issued a stricter permit 5 years from now, 10 years from now. 5 years is your typical time frame for a permit to expire and be issued a new one. We could put that money into upgrading the lagoons and going with a groundwater discharge permit, and then 5 years from now we could be told, here's a new permit, you're going to have to do a plant upgrade to meet this permit. So it could be $5 to $8 million roughly just to do that to the lagoons with rapid infiltration basins, and you're already 2/3 of the way into a plant that will protect us for the future, which is why in my mind anyways, it doesn't seem like one of the better options. It's obviously no protection whatsoever for the future, and it's basically just throwaway money in my mind. Lagoons, they're good at what they're good at. It sounds like that's one of the phrases that we use in wastewater. It sounds like a ridiculous thing to say, but it's gone on as truth because they were designed to do, what I said before, reduce biological oxygen demand, which is the leading contaminant that you want to remove in wastewater. That's basically what you base everything off of. There's no idea of ammonia removal or anything like that. The sequencing batch reactor, which is option B2 with rapid infiltration basins, are what we're hoping it will pan out. If we're able to do a groundwater discharge, the capital cost is less than option A2, which would be an SBR with tertiary treatment, but it's the operating cost that will be significantly less. It will be not to throw, don't hold me to it, but I'd say probably half the cost in operating costs from an SBR with rapid infiltration basins versus an SBR with tertiary treatment. And that $2 or $3 million it's a lot of money, but it will reflect it. You would make that money back or save that money much faster with a SBR with rapid infiltration basins, just because of how much less treatment you have to do.
Dylan, have we identified where we can do the groundwater discharge yet?
We haven't. We have some sites in mind, but we haven't been able to pick a site and verify that it would actually be able to support any large quantity of effluent that we would discharge to it. So it would have to be able to. We would like to keep what we have currently for a permit, which would be 550,000 gallons a day of discharge, because of what Mike pointed out before. There is the potential for a lot of growth in town. So you don't want to, bring the design flow of the plant down and then have a problem with discharging, because then you're going to be in the same predicament that we're in now, sort of. So we're trying to find a site that will support a large quantity of effluent to leach into the ground. And it's not so much about how fast it leaches. It has to be the correct materials. Because
Hey, Dylan,
yes,
do we own any of those sites you're talking about?
I believe we do. We don't
No.
own any, Mark.
We do not own any of them. We would have to work with the landowners.
But are they for sale is the other question.
Not right now, they're not.
Yeah. And are they close to our present treatment plant?
One of them is and one of them is not.
So if we had the one that is not, have we figured in the cost of maintaining and creating a pipeline, and if that would require easements and right of ways to get a pipeline to it?
No, that will be part of the 2021 work.
But could that potentially be blown up by someone not wanting to grant us the right to run these lines through their properties?
No, we have identified a potential way to get it to that site, all by town-owned property. However, it's very convoluted and it would be very expensive. And we have not calculated at this point what the operating costs would be of pumping the water all that way and maintaining that system once we got it installed. It will be the most expensive way to do the groundwater discharge option.
Yeah, I just wanted to get that on the table, because that's
Yep.
a variable we really have to look at, that we might be able to build the plant for less, but getting the water to the discharge could double the cost, maybe, you think?
That's correct. And so that's part of this evaluation, Mike, that the engineers have looked at and that we've started discussing, is the flexibility to meet new permit limits or to operate it. It's really more than just meeting new permit limits, because when we put this column in this table, we were considering the fact that in 5 years after we build this new plant, the EPA is going to issue us an update to the permit, and they can change the limits on us. So we need to look at the flexibility to meet new permit limits. We also need to consider operating costs, which are not part of this table. So, but I think both options 2 and A2 and B2 have probably the best operating costs. They're much better than the other two options in the long run.
If we can get the land.
If we can get the
B2.
land for the B, yes.
Yeah, B2. And the other factor is that we'll be running at the same time the current plant. So
That's
all the land that's there, the lagoons, everything, that's not available.
That's not available because we have to
Right.
continue to run the old plant. That's correct.
Okay.
Now, we've already talked to the engineers a little bit conceptually about the possibility of modifying our operation, but that's only a limited amount of land that we would gain by doing that. So there are a lot of limitations that we're trying to work around at this time. So when we look at the CIP and we talk about the funding part of this, the financial part of this, basically what I have done at this point is I've taken this $20 million number here, and then I took the $5 million bond issue for 2021, and that's how I arrived at, which I will break down in just a minute, but that's how I arrived at the 25 million total project cost. Okay, so let me just show you that right here. Sorry, thought I had that. And so you see 5 million in fiscal year 21, 5 million in 22, and then 15 million for the actual construction year in 23, a total of $25 million total. Okay. This first 5 million, I have a breakdown for. The rest of this money for years 22 and 23, those are much softer numbers based on this conceptual engineering work that we've completed to date. These numbers I anticipate will be changing based on what we're able to do with the first $5 million. Okay, so let me break that down for you. Oh, sorry, wrong one. So here's the breakdown of the first 5 million. 1.5 million for existing wastewater treatment equipment replacements and safety measures. That's the other table that we showed you with the breakdown of the 1.478 million. 300,000 is in for preliminary engineering report, environmental reviews, and preliminary permitting. That will be especially important for the groundwater discharge if we have to start getting new permits for from New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services after this $450,000 for continuation of the evaluation and site identification. And then there's a very large number here, 2.75 million, that's set aside for land purchase for the groundwater discharge. We base that on a need for at least 10 acres of land at the highest and best use cost, which right now is between $250,000 and $275,000 an acre for a lot here in Waterville Valley. Doesn't mean that we will spend all of that money for land acquisition, but again, we're just doing a planning purpose budget here because we don't have a whole lot of information to go on. The way that I would recommend that we design this warrant article would be for all of these uses, or if we do not spend it on these, that the money roll over to the construction side so that we can lower the 2022 and 2023 numbers as we go forward. Okay, so if we get all the land for $1 million, we would have 1.75 million available for construction purposes, and we could lower the $15 million number in the CIP. If we don't use all of this for engineering, you know, all of this, et cetera. That's why I said, Margaret, that we're going to do as much contingency improvements at the existing plant as we can, so that we can roll some of this 1.5 million into the construction of the new plant if we get to 2023 and the existing facility is still working. So this 5 million is very important because we can't continue to refine the numbers in the out years unless we do this preliminary engineering report. It's going to be required by DES to actually get the plant permitted. Okay, they are going to make us do this PER. And if we look at the National Forest land adjacent to Town Hall here, if that's one of the parcels that we look to buy, we're going to have a lot of environmental reviews and engineering reports that we're going to have to file with USDA and the Forest Service. So this money is critical here in all aspects, because if we identify a site, we also need to have money available for the selectmen to be able to go and negotiate with landowners to actually purchase the land.
Mark?
Yeah.
I've got a question on that. I think we have to run a plan B alongside of your plan A, because what if we have landowners that don't want to sell? What if we've identified the place and they go, no, we don't want to sell, or the abutters go, we don't want it next to us?
Well, then but we funded the most expensive option that does not use groundwater discharge. So if we go with the 25 million, the way that it's in the CIP, that goes back to this.
But what kind of plan are you talking about when you're talking about engineering and planning? Are you going to plan for a non-groundwater plan, or are you going to plan with the groundwater? You know, my question is, if we spend all this money on engineering and then find out we can't have the land to do that,
That would
where are we
be A2,
again?
right? That would be A2.
That's A2. Yeah, here, I'm sorry, I'm just getting it, there we go. That is this option right here. So we would go back to this option, Mike, A2.
Yeah, but are we spending money to have B2 designed?
No, yeah, but we can't we don't want to make an offer on a piece of land that we don't need. And without the engineer.
Oh, no, I get that. I'm saying it the other way around. I'm saying we don't want to design a system that requires land when we don't have the land.
So are you saying that we wouldn't even look at the B options? We just go directly to
Well,
A?
I would think I would find out about the land before you go with the B options.
But I can't find out about the land until I've got money to pay the engineers to do the studies.
No, I understand what you're saying, but what I'm talking about, the engineering should be multi-purpose engineering as opposed to one thing, because if we spend a ton of money engineering one plan and realize we can't have the land for it.
But the plants are totally different. They are exclusive of each other. The land is only usable for the groundwater discharge. It's not usable.
No, I hear what you're saying. So my question is, are you going to engineer a groundwater discharge plant without having a commitment on land?
We're going to do we're going to do as little engineering as we possibly can to make sure that the land is usable.
Okay, no, that's
Then we'll
fine.
talk-
That's,
and then we
I
talk.
just wanted to hear, that's just what I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
As little as possible till we make sure that the land we're gonna offer on will work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep.
And when could we find that out, Mark?
Probably third quarter of next year, depending on when we get authorization to spend the money. I mean, it may be towards the end of next year because of the time limits that we're going to be under with postponing
You mean town meeting?
town meeting and all that.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, I think we will be hard pressed to get it done in 2021.
But what if they make us?
Well, you're absolutely right, Mike. I mean, at some point, the EPA may put the pressure on where we're going to have to negotiate with the engineer that this is their job and we need this stuff a lot faster. But I'm trying to be realistic on the amount of time it takes to do this work. It's not a guy sitting around with a calculator and a pencil. This is a lot of work. And it's going to be how responsive is the state and the EPA. You know, when we come up with ideas and when we do submissions, you guys have seen how the Forest Service can hold things up for years at a time. We saw it on well 4. So
What about the land that we currently use for our wastewater treatment facility? Any plans?
That is one of the current town-owned land for town hall and the treatment plant is one of the parcels that we're going to do more investigation on. It has some positive characteristics, but until we do some definite subsurface investigation, I don't know to what extent.
Right.
But how are you going to build
Right.
rapid infiltration basin next to town hall? You can't do it.
Right, I
About
understand that.
moving town hall.
Yeah.
And the maintenance bay and the fire station. And, you know, it's not just move our offices somewhere else. It's an entire facility. So now for the good news. The fiscal impact of the CIP. Let me find it here. I don't know what I did with it. Yeah, I don't want to look at that. Oh, good grief. Sorry.
Hey, Diane. Yep, you got my picture? Exactly. It's even worse. My wife got 2 People magazines today that she swore were stolen by the post office.
Hey,
And
Mike,
her,
you're not on mute.
There you go. All right. So here's what we're looking at right now for the CIP and projected debt service payments. So you have, this is our existing total debt on 12/31 of, starting on 12/31/20 for each of these years. Okay, so this year in the budget, you'll see we have debt service principal and interest payments of 539,264. We're not planning on adding any new principal or interest payments in 21 because we would be borrowing money in 21 and we don't make the first payment until 22. And then for each of these projects in the CIP, so for the $1 million for well 4, which we have not borrowed yet, $5 million for the wastewater treatment plant and $900,000 for road repairs, okay? If we add those 3 projects together and we start paying on them in 2022, our debt service principal and interest payments are estimated to go up to 1.15 million in 2022. At a valuation of about 334 million, 756,000 total for the town, that's $3.44 on the tax rate. Okay. And then, so I did that for each one of these projects that are in the CIP up until 2027. And the numbers in parentheses here are the terms for each one of those loans. The maximum that we can borrow money for is 29 years with the bond bank. And they have the most favorable terms that we have seen in the last 5 years. So we have not been able to find, at least to this point, a financial institution that'll loan us money at a reasonable interest rate for longer than the bond bank will. Everybody else has always, their bids have been for shorter terms than the bond bank. So this 29 years is what I've used as the maximum number. So you can see as we add, and then especially as we do the big project in 2023, that 2024 is the maximum year for debt service payments, principal and interest, and that is $2.8 million in 2024, which is $8.24 on the tax rate. Now, this would be every dollar paid by Waterville Valley and repaid, whether it would go towards, be paid for through water and sewer rates, or whether it would be paid for through tax revenue. That still needs to be determined exactly how the money is raised, but that is the overall impact on the tax rate. This also does not include if we can convince state or federal funding sources to allow us to participate in the grant programs that are currently available. Over the last 2 years, we have asked, and we have been told no repeatedly by USDA, by the Department of Environmental Services, that we do not qualify for any loan grant programs. So right now we are doing all of the financial planning based on the town of Waterville Valley having to pay the entire cost of the plant. So we're using worst case cost estimates that we have right now, the absolute highest, and we are using the fact that the town has to pay all of this money in these calculations. So we're trying to be as conservative as we can. The other thing I'd like to point out is all of these numbers from 2028 all the way down to 2052 do not include any of these projects beginning in 2028 that are on our extended CIP plan that we developed 2 years ago. So these projects have not been worked into these total debt service numbers here. Okay, so I just wanted to make everyone aware that everything stops at this bold line.
Mark, are some of these new debt entries absolutely fixed for those particular years, or can they be moved around? Or is that a question we can look at? For example, the ambulance, the dredge, Corcoran Pond, fire truck replacement.
They're all flexible. None of them are committed.
Right.
None of them are statutory, but
Right.
these are, and we haven't gotten the road estimates yet from HEB.
Right.
So the road information may change. I don't know if we need to spend the 900,000, but that's what's in the plan right now.
Right.
So yeah, a lot of these numbers are flexible, but the wastewater treatment plant numbers should probably be pretty close to this. And we are definitely going to have to make some kind of road repairs
Right.
and other work around town
Right.
within this 7-year period. So I think for planning purposes, we should maintain some kind of numbers here. I don't want to eradicate everything else. You know, the ambulance is going to have to be replaced either in 2023 or within plus or minus, or yeah, maybe even minus a year or two.
Okay, now that's what I was looking for, because obviously we ramp up quite steeply, and then we sort of, I don't want to say coast, but then I'll use the word coast down.
Well, that's just naturally what we know. That's why we extended the CIP a couple of years ago, all the way out here to 2037. But
yeah,
I mean, we are really giving a very scientific wild butt guess on these numbers, right? So
I understand.
I mean, 2037, who knows what it's going to, who knows what roads are going to be made out of in 2037.
Who knows who will be here in
Right.
2037.
Yes, I'm not even going to start that conversation.
No, but we've tried to be as realistic as we could.
No, Mark, I get it. It's there, it's real, and these are necessities. These are not luxury items. This is not, we're getting a second fire engine, or we're buying spacesuits for, public safety to go off to zip into the mountains.
Right. Yeah. And there are other projects out here, so,
Right.
you know.
Oh, no, we've got it, but this is a necessity. We really don't have much choice in what we've been doing. It's the same thing with the dam on a larger scale. It's the same thing with the wells.
Right.
We are in this situation. We have to make this place livable. The cost to make this place livable will be borne by the people who are living with it at the time. We are bonding it with enough of a time period on it where those who are going to be enjoying it will be paying for it. So there's really not a problem. We'll just welcome to the new frontier.
Yeah, no, I think you've got it, hit it on the head of the nail, Mike. And of course, the wastewater treatment facility, potentially that does not have to be all added to the tax rate. We can divide that up between user and tax, user fee and tax rate.
And we also talked about the new tap fees going on for future large expansion.
Right.
And especially road repair and everything else. I think we can take some of these things and look at those as if those plans ever get bigger and come more, towards reality.
That's right, an impact. Right.
And let me apologize for that phone call, but it was necessity.
And the other thing I just want to say is it's pretty amazing that we've been able to operate this plant for 50 years. I mean, it's truly a credit to the employees, both past and present, that we've been able to keep this antique going as we have. And you know, it wasn't going to be that way for too much longer with everything the EPA is requiring. So it's good to jump on this and start the planning process and bite the bullet and go.
Terry, I know you had had some questions. Did we address those questions that you had before? Is this still muted? Oh, you can't unmute?
Who are you talking to?
Terry,
Terry,
Terry's muted.
Oh.
Terry's muted.
There you go.
There he is.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt, but Mark, I would like to interject one thing that is troublesome to me, and I know we've talked about it.
Yeah.
I don't want to throw a monkey wrench into the whole thing because they've done a wonderful job putting it all together, and I think that the conclusions are correct. That this isn't it's not a luxury; it's something that has to be done. But when I look at the existing facility, granted it was built back in 1974, but it was a state-of-the-art facility. And if you look at the flow chart that you had up a little bit earlier, it's complicated. It has primary, secondary, and tertiary treatment. And it does an excellent job with regard to getting that water clean. You can drink it. And it's a little troublesome to me that even though that the proposed facility is quite a bit simpler, it's only, if you're going to be doing groundwater disposition, it's only a primary and a secondary process. The tertiary isn't even included in that. So it's much less complicated, and it takes less area too, because those tanks are smaller than the lagoons and so forth. But when you look at the cost of the engineering and the cost of the, at one time, a very advanced treatment plant, cutting edge, that was $1 million. And if you adjust for inflation, if you built it today, it would be $6 million. And so it's a little unsettling to me that we're looking at 2.5 to 3 times that amount to build a facility today, which in today's terms is no more of a special facility than that was then. So I would just suggest that we be a little careful with the engineering and test the engineers and find out, why is it that this is costing 2.5 times what a facility back then, which was state of the art, cost at that time, or in adjusted dollars, cost 2.5 times as much. So that's the only thing I can think of that's a little bit troubling. And one other thing that I think might be helpful, in this chart that shows the existing ammonia pollutants, they're going into the river. And the only time we really have to report any amounts is in July and August. But we do have records of what the flows are in the other months, and we've plotted them on the average. And if you look at what you're actually doing is plotting the average against the total allowed, which I don't think is accurate. We should be plotting, for purposes of analyzing it, what the maximum flows are as opposed to what the allowed are, because it's a little misleading, I think, because I look at that chart and I say, geez, it looks to me like we're almost meeting all the requirements without adding any chlorination in 10 out of the 12 months. And so the first thing that comes to your mind is, if you're going to meet the 12.7 in 2 of those different time periods, a little bit of chlorination at those periods of time, which apparently now get none, might just keep it under what the maximum is. So it would be interesting to see a graph that showed the maximum rather than the average flows as far as ammonia is concerned. That's about all I have.
Dylan, can you respond to Terry's question?
Yeah, it's not as simple as that though, Terry, because in some of those months we only have to test once a month. So some of those graphs, there's only one sample that's based on. So there's no maximum or average. It's just one single number that's forming that. So that's what's going on, and what I've been getting at is we monitor the ammonia coming out of the lagoons on a weekly basis. Not the effluent, because we don't have to meet a permit, but because we do monitor the lagoons, we know, and we have data sheets that show the lagoon is not even close to meeting those parameters. That's why I had mentioned earlier in the meeting that those numbers are skewed on that bar graph, because the tertiary treatment can also help with that. But that being said, the carbon that we use, the newest carbon we have is older than I am. So almost all the carbon, we have 3 carbon vessels. 2 of those carbon vessels are totally spent. And the one that we've been running on since I've been here is just, like I said, it's as old as I am, and its useful life is almost totally spent. It's not going to be able to absorb anything any longer.
So we will, but Terry, that's a good point, and we will talk to the engineers about that graph, because I don't want to be misleading to people, and I don't want to have that reaction from people that, hey, you're meeting the limits already. What's the problem? Why are you spending all of this money to meet limits that you're already meeting? And so we've got to do a better job of explaining those bar graphs to people. And ask the engineers if there's a better way to present that info. Do we want to, are there any comments from the public, or are they just listening, or did we raise any questions, or getting feedback earlier in the process is better? I see a Jason, a Mark, I saw an iPad, but they left. Jason, Mark, is there anything that? Nope. Okay. That's all right. So, other considerations, for 2021, personnel, I've mentioned it, I think. We're concerned, maybe not immediately, but as this project gets going, with the scope of the project and our need to answer a whole lot of questions, especially in 2021, how do we want to address our personnel?
We need more.
Or, huh?
We need more. I mean, that's your
Yeah,
point.
I'm not paying him to say that. I just want to be upfront about that.
Right. It was implicit in your comments, Mark.
Well, yeah.
Mark, were you talking about needing a project engineer?
I don't know. I've been toying with how we're going to do that, but we've got just management of the project. We've got administrative needs, because we're talking about an amount of money that's 5 times our operating budget. So the control of that and the expenditure of funds and everything else, we will have an engineering firm that once we get to the construction phase, there's construction management, because they're going to need, under the permits that we get, engineers are going to be needed to certify different steps. So they'll be tracking those costs for us, but I'm more worried about before we get there, and the fact that that's going to be about, $10 million down the road. We also have public relations, because we're going to need to figure out how to explain $8.24 for just debt service in the town budget, unless you want to just say it's what we have to do. But I'm thinking social media.
Mark,
No,
I think you're a little ahead of yourself on this, Mark. I think we have a very educated and realistic group of people that live there. And I think if you just get some little pins that say flush or not to flush, that would pretty much define it. That is the question.
Yeah, you're on now you're not on a sewer, right, Mike?
Oh, yeah.
Well, neither am I.
But
Neither am
but
I.
I get it. I think we're a little bit ahead of ourselves now. Let's look at the budget the way you have the budget. And I would assume, Terry, you would know better than I would on this, that if you replace some of the engineering with our own engineer or project manager, the cost will go down on what we're paying the other firms, correct? So maybe that's an equalizer?
I don't really know, Michael, and you just
Yeah.
have to kind of check it out and see.
I have absolutely no clue, but, I don't think it's something, I am definitely right now against hiring another person.
I don't think we do it right now, but I think it needs to be in the plan. And it's not just from the engineering standpoint. It's dealing with this every day. It's whether or not.
Oh, no, I get it, but isn't that what we're paying these guys hundreds of thousands of dollars to do?
Not to talk to the Forest Service and not to.
Well, I think they've done that in the past for us, haven't they? In most of our projects, those guys have been out there being either with us or being our front person.
Okay.
Let's just see what happens. Let's see if they say we can't do it or we can do it.
Okay.
But we're talking about $25 million here. This is a lot of money, and I don't want to be tagged on spending it in ways that doesn't need to be spent. Just because it's such a large amount of money, we should be watching the pennies as well as the dollars.
Yeah, but I think Mark's question is about who do we want watching the pennies? Do we want the guys that we're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to be watching the pennies in this instance?
Well, we've operated on that with all of our plans. We've had Joe.
Yeah, but we've never had anything this big, Mike.
I think if you get to $1 million or $2 million, it's big. I don't see the difference between 2 million and 25 million.
Yeah, maybe not, but it's something to keep in mind. I mean, this is going to require a lot of effort on Dylan's part, and Mark's part, and Jim's part. It's over and above the things they are doing now.
Well, we're looking way down the road, so let's see who the players are a few years down the road. Because we're probably talking realistically 6 or 7 years out, Mark. Realistically,
no more than 5, Mike, if not less. 5 or less.
Well,
that's probably for the plant to be online, though.
Right.
That's not the construction phase.
We're talking about starting this in April of this year.
That's the first part, but I don't think you're going to get a shovel in the ground before what, 23, 24?
22.
22
or 23 would be the.
I don't know. Things don't move as quickly as from what I've seen about how things move, and with permits and everything else.
Okay, well, let's just keep it in mind in terms of when we really need to make sure that this is going the way we want it to go. I think there's probably a lot of work just leading up to getting shovel in the ground that has to be dealt with, but I'm willing to let it go for a little while longer, but I just don't want to be driving these guys into the ground as they try and manage a project of this size with all of the other things that have to be done. Keep in mind, we have to upgrade our current facility at the same time that we're planning for a new one.
And we're currently running our plant with one person. Don't forget that. We have one operator right now.
It's also something to be said of if you have, I don't know, I'm leaning towards having a project manager and whatever we need. If we're going to spend 25 million, let's make sure we spend it well.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying we go out and start the search process tomorrow. That's not.
That's what I was hearing. The way
we're talking about concept. We're talking about concept at this
And-
point in time.
And but it is something, Mike, that I would say sometime in 2021 that we would need to start moving on, because there's a lot of work in 2021 that you need to have done, so that we're ready for 2022 and a further explanation of what we're doing.
Can you provide at the needed time mark or before then, what we're looking at in terms of cost for a project manager?
Yeah.
Is it just the one position you're looking at, or is it something more
No.
than that?
It's more than that. And the new plant, looking to 25 and beyond, the new plant is also going to be more personnel intensive. We're not
Oh,
going
no,
to.
that's not my concern. Mike, let's just get this thing rolling, figure out which way we're going, and then we'll figure it in.
Okay, no, that's fine. Okay, so on the timing of this for town meeting time, there is a new bill that is going to be introduced, I guess, that I just found out from NHMA today on, that is going to give us another option for the extension of town meeting into April, May, June, or July. So I will send you a text of that. But there's going to be another potential process if they pass it. The thing about it is it's a Senate bill instead of a House bill. So I'm thinking that if it gets introduced Wednesday, it's being introduced because it has support. And it could end up being very fast legislation. So we may have different options for the presentation of town meeting. So
Good.
look that over when I send it to you today, and we do need to think about how the timing of town meeting affects our ability to do some of this work in this project. Because
Yeah.
we shouldn't do the work until we have the money approved.
Right. Right.
So we want to push back town meeting so we can have the face
Bless you.
discussion, but we can't push it back too far.
Well, hopefully the new bill, if it passes, will give us a little more flexibility.
Yeah, definitely
Good.
would. Okay, any other questions or?
No,
Mark, I'd just like to add one thing that I kind of, in response to Terry's question before, and I should have mentioned this at that point, but it didn't come to me until now. It's not so much that the plant hasn't been able to achieve the numbers that it has for this extended period of time. It's that the infrastructure around it is failing. That's the problem.
yeah,
It won't be able to do it for much longer. So regardless of the fact that it was able to meet the limits that were set and meet them quite well, you won't have a plant if we don't do anything 5 years from now, 10 years from now. That's the ultimate issue, is everything around it is falling apart because of the treatment method that we use. And it is, like you said, Terry, a cutting edge at the time facility. But unfortunately, just by the nature of the beast, it has eaten away the facility from the inside out.
So, okay, so thank you for the time.
Okay.
Did you all see Judy's note in the chat box that there is a warrant for you to sign for water and sewer billing?
Okay.
yep.
Okay.
Right.
other than that.
I've got to go to Georgia and get some votes, so I'll be back.
Get us several 100,000 if you could, please.
Okay, so I guess, can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
I will make that, Mike, I will make the motion to adjourn.
I will second it. Margaret, all in favor? Margaret, aye.
Rich, I.
Mike, aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
But
Thanks.
say
Goodbye.
bye.
See everybody later.